somewhere between checking your payslip and closing the app immediately afterward, a specific question flickers through your mind for exactly 1 second before you suppress it. Am I actually ahead for my age, or am I quietly behind? You do not let yourself finish the thought, because finishing it means you might have to sit with the answer, whatever it turns out to be. Most people carry a rough, uneasy guess about where they stand for years, built from half-overheard conversations, a friend's new car, and a colleague's offhand comment about a bonus, rather than from a single number they have ever actually checked properly against real data. Today, we are going to finish that question for you properly, using the real ONS numbers, broken down by age band, so you can find out exactly where you actually stand instead of guessing at 2 in the morning based on nothing more solid than a feeling. And by the end, you will also understand why the single average salary figure everyone quotes at dinner parties, in comment sections, and in half-remembered headlines is, in a very specific and important sense, misleading almost everyone who repeats it without checking it first. Ages 18 to 21. The starting line. Full-time earnings in this bracket sit at roughly £23,000 to £25,000 a year, barely above the national living wage once you annualize it. This is not a bracket where anyone should feel behind, because almost nobody has built meaningful earning power yet, and the number here says considerably more about the legal wage floor than it does about any individual's actual potential. What actually matters at this age is not the number itself, it is the direction it is heading in and how quickly. The national living wage alone, at £12.21 an hour, annualizes to around £25,400 for a full 40-hour week, meaning a huge share of this entire age bracket is earning close to the legal floor rather than anything reflecting genuine career progress yet. If this is where you currently sit, you are not behind. You simply have not started climbing the steepest part of the curve yet, and it is coming faster than most people in this bracket expect. Ages 22 to 29. This is the single biggest percentage jump you will ever experience in your entire working life, and it is worth actually pausing on that word ever, because nothing later in this table comes close to matching it. Median full-time pay climbs to somewhere between £30,000 and £32,000, an increase of well over 25% from the previous bracket in just a handful of years. This is the decade where simply having a job converts into having a career, where the first promotion, the first job move, and the first genuine pay negotiation all tend to land, often in rapid succession rather than spread evenly across the years. And here is a detail worth knowing, one that quietly contradicts the advice most people were given growing up. Job movers in this bracket earn 10 to 20% more on average than people who stay loyal to a single employer through their 20s. Loyalty at this specific stage of a career is rarely the highest paying strategy, however much it might feel like the responsible, sensible choice at the time. Ages 30 to 39. This is where careers genuinely start to compound, where the difference between two people on the same starting salary a decade earlier can widen dramatically based on decisions made along the way. Median pay climbs further to somewhere between £36,000 and £40,000, and this is also the decade where the gender pay gap widens sharply for a specific, well-documented and genuinely uncomfortable reason. Research from the Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that within a decade of having a first child, women's hourly wages fall roughly 33% below men with children, even after properly accounting for education and experience. The gap between men and women in their 20s sits under 4%, barely noticeable. By their 30s, it has widened considerably, and career breaks around childcare are the primary, well-evidenced driver behind that widening gap. Ages 40 to 49, peak earning years, and the numbers back this up unambiguously, more clearly than in any other bracket on this entire table, with almost no ambiguity left once you actually look at the figures side by side. Median full-time pay reaches somewhere around £42,000 to £43,000, the highest of any age bracket in the entire table. The mean, pulled upward by a smaller number of very high earners in this same bracket, sits considerably higher still, close to £54,591, according to the most recent ONS data, with the top 10% threshold for this age group sitting close to £88,658. If you are in your 40s and earning above the mean for your age group, you are, statistically, ahead of the vast majority of people your age in Britain right now, comfortably inside territory most of the working population will never reach. Ages 50 to 59. Here is the surprising turn almost nobody expects the first time they see this table laid out in full. Pay does not keep climbing the way the previous 4 decades might suggest it should. It starts to level off, and in most recent data, it edges downward slightly to somewhere between £38,000 and £41,000. This is not universally a story of decline or failure. Some of it reflects genuinely reduced hours as people approach retirement deliberately on their own terms, having already built what they need. Some reflects early retirement among higher earners, removing themselves from the full-time figures entirely, quietly exiting the dataset at the exact moment they were earning the most. And some reflects the harder, less comfortable reality of age discrimination and redundancy hitting this bracket disproportionately hard, pushing experienced workers into lower paid roles later in their careers than they would ever have chosen, 60 and over. The decline continues down to somewhere between £32,000 and £36,000 on average, the lowest full-time figure since the early 20s bracket we started with. Again, this bracket contains a genuine mix of very different people, not one uniform story of decline. People working reduced hours by deliberate choice, having already built what they need over 4 decades of earning. People who have already secured their pension and are working purely by preference, for the routine or the social contact rather than the money. And people who have been pushed out of higher paying roles and are rebuilding in less senior positions later than they would have liked, carrying real frustration underneath a number that on paper simply looks like a mild decline. Now, why the average you hear quoted everywhere is, in a specific and important sense, a lie, or at least a number doing far less honest work than most people assume. There are 2 entirely different numbers people call average, and they get used interchangeably in a way that quietly misleads almost everyone who repeats them at a dinner party or reads them in a headline. The median, the figure where exactly half of people earn more and half earn less, currently sits at £39,039 for full-time UK workers overall. The mean, calculated by adding up every single salary and dividing by the number of people, comes out considerably higher in most age brackets because a relatively small number of extremely high earners drag the average upward for everyone else beneath them. If someone tells you the average salary for your age and it feels wildly out of reach, almost insultingly so, there is a genuine chance they are quoting the mean, the number skewed by a handful of very well-paid outliers, rather than the median, the number that actually reflects what a genuinely typical person your age earns. And location changes this entire picture almost as much as age does, sometimes more. London salaries sit dramatically above the national figures at every single age bracket, while regions like the North East consistently sit at the bottom of the table year after year, decade after decade. The gap between the two for genuinely comparable ages and comparable roles regularly runs to around £30,000 a year, a salary that looks entirely unremarkable in London, barely worth mentioning among colleagues, can place you comfortably in the top percentile of earners in the North East. And the reverse is just as true in the other direction. Comparing your salary to a single flat national figure without ever accounting for where you actually live and work is close to meaningless, and yet it is exactly what most people do the moment a headline number appears on their screen. So here is the honest truth about comparing yourself to any of this, the part that actually matters more than any single figure in the entire table. Use your specific age bracket as a genuine starting point, not the final verdict on how well you are doing with your one particular life. Check whether the figure you are comparing against is the median or the mean, because the gap between those 2 numbers alone can make an entirely ordinary, perfectly respectable salary feel like a quiet failure for no real reason at all. And factor in your region and your sector before drawing any conclusion, because a below-average salary in London's tech sector can comfortably out-earn an above-average salary in retail in the Northeast, despite what a single flattened national headline might suggest about either person. Know your real number in your real bracket against the real regional figure rather than the single flattering or frightening headline that happens to be circulating this particular week, written by someone who never checked whether they were quoting the median or the mean in the first place. If you learned something from this video, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.